The RH law, which was passed in December of 2012, should have made it possible for women to have access to information on their reproductive health and to practice the freedom of having choices on reproduction as well as protect their maternal rights.
Ini-ensure ng RH law ang serbisyo para sa mga kababaihan gaya ng family planning services and information, gaya ng prenatal, postnatal, no? Services. No? Pag ikaw ay nagbubuntis o nanganganak.
In fact, there are several laws that support and protect the maternal rights of women. Under Section 13 of the Magna Carta for Women, a pregnant faculty member and student shall not be refused admission on account of her pregnancy outside of marriage during her term in school.
Most common problem pagdating yung nagbubuntis sila yung kanilang maternal functions. That is why ang batas natin sa labor code nag-provide ng maternity leave in relation to the SSS law. Under the Magna Carta of Women also, yung faculty member na babae, public man o private school, nagbuntis outside of marriage, dati tinatanggal sa trabaho, ngayon hindi na pwedeng tanggalin yan because that would be discrimination against women.
Similarly, it is unlawful for any employer to refuse admission of his pregnant employee from returning to work or to discharge her due to her pregnancy according to the labor code. With several laws protecting the maternal rights of women, how come violations against these are still rampant? How can women protect their maternal rights? And which government agencies should they go to concerning their maternal rights?
Good evening. You're watching Legal Help Desk from the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. We are continuing our celebration of Women's Month by tackling the reproductive health law.
Our guests for tonight are Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio of the University of the Philippines Center for Women's Studies, Mr. Romeo Dongato, Executive Director of the Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development, and Ms. Princess Nemenzo of Women Health Philippines.
Ayan. So good evening. So it's Dr. Guy, Rom, and Princess. Yeah, we're jam-packed tonight.
Yes,
because
and for the first time, ever since Women's Month started, we have a gentleman with us.
There you go.
For the past few episodes.
Yeah, because I've been feeling alone. I've been feeling alone for the past weeks. No? Actually, 4 weeks. This is the fourth week. Or fourth week, third week. Anyway, so
Yes.
it's always we always had guests. We're women, but I'm also one of you guys. I mean, one of you girls, one of you women. So so we'll start off. I guess we're gonna be talking about maternal rights, but in mostly in the light of the RH law, no, which is still pending in the Supreme Court. Perhaps maybe Dr. Guy, maybe you want to give a status of where we are for our televiewers who probably don't know what the current situation is with regards to the RH law.
Yes, the RH law became a law in December. It passed both houses of Congress in early December 2012. And then was signed into law before the end of 2012, like December 28. Very quickly, the implementing rules and regulations were also put out and signed. But before the law could be implemented, on March 19, the Supreme Court issued a status quo ante-order saying the law can't be implemented based on petitions that wanted the Supreme Court to decide whether the law is constitutional or not. Okay. And we're still waiting for that decision at this point.
All right.
Well, I guess this is an appropriate time that even if the law is still on TRO, Dr. Guy and of course Ms. Princess and Rom, you can enlighten a lot of the viewers here on the benefits of the RH bill, especially of course for women's health, reproductive rights. Will they really benefit if this law was given full effect?
Can I just mention that we fought for this law for 14 years.
14 years?
Wow. 14 years.
Wow.
So women and both men and women fought for this law. And we continued to lobby through all the congresses. And immediately after it was passed, as according to Guy nga, they submitted 15 cases against the reproductive health law before the Supreme Court.
Various groups filed, or just
More or
basically
less, but they're all allied.
allied,
They're all allied to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So it has taken that long, and I think the denial of the implementation of the reproductive health law is causing a lot of problems, particularly for women who have been dying every day. And so I think we should lay the blame, for women, for maternal deaths on the steps of all those groups that have denied the implementation of this law.
Now that you've brought up deaths caused by lack of this law, what will this law provide to women in order to ensure their health and their safety?
Karen, there are three pillars for reducing maternal deaths that are scientifically proven, recommended by leading health organizations, for example, like the World Health Organization. And these pillars would be access to emergency obstetric care facilities, access to a skilled health, birth attendant, and the third thing, which the anti-RH people find unacceptable, is access to contraceptives. However, the studies do show that you need all three to effectively reduce the risk of dying in pregnancy. And all those three, apart from a lot of other things, are in the RH law and require the government to provide the majority, if not all, of Filipino women with these three important pillars.
And of course, your position is that, as you mentioned, can't be two out of the three or one of the three. It has to be all three.
Yes, when we call them pillars, that means that you can't. There are three, and usually health researchers do try to reduce the number of interventions to what would actually be absolutely necessary. So, for example, when the World Health Organization speaks, it knows it's speaking to governments. Governments who would like to be as efficient and cost-effective as possible. So you wouldn't add, things that you could take out. So those are three, and it can't be less than those three, according to the latest, scientific studies, which are well-made, replicated, and numerous.
Yes,
and I think one important feature of this law is it offers age-appropriate sexuality education for the youth.
I think that's one of the concerns for a lot of people, the sex education.
And the latest data is that 570 young women are getting pregnant each day. So
570.
570
Do you
each
know,
day. That's
Mr.
2010.
Mr. Rom, would you know the statistics of that figure? I mean, out of the 570, how many women or girls there are underage or below 18?
That's 19 below.
19 below.
19 below.
That's very
Five-
young.
That's a
570
very-
pregnancies a day that are 19 and below. That's
And
a
you
big number.
have also stats of, I guess, the deaths for these young, or you have statistics for all, for not just this
I think
young.
for all Princess mentioned that's 14 deaths per day.
14 deaths per day.
Already at least not 12 to 14.
12 to 14.
Probably,
But
already.
we do know that the number of teenage pregnancies is rising.
Is rising.
And we do know that the younger the girl who gets pregnant, there are more attendant risks. And I'm not just talking about health risks. No? The likelihood of her not finishing school
Yes.
is there. The likelihood of many other dreams in life that you would like to achieve is there. So it really is a problem if we're not able to get these services in place.
Okay. Doctora mentioned the three pillars for health for women to reduce the number of deaths related to pregnancy or maternity. And of course, let's go
One by one.
Yes, let's go through each one by one. One is access to health facilities. And currently, what makes the lack of RH bill basically not address the access to health facilities, considering we have public hospitals, we have world-class private facilities. What will this law, RH law, provide to women that would make them, the facilities more accessible to them?
There's also been a shift in the way we're looking at women at risk for maternal trouble. No? Hindi lang yung death, but you could have morbidities or some complications in pregnancy and childbirth. And that shift tells us now that you can't really use what the old idea was you could predict high risk and low risk pregnancies. And that has been displaced by findings that show that you have to anticipate that 15% of all pregnancies will have some sort of complications. And you really, at this point, can't tell which are high risks and which are low risk pregnancies. You know, there are still pregnancies you should look more carefully into, but at a public health level, you should anticipate 15%. And there are also studies that show that if you can give to, let's say, 1 every 500 women access to a package of care that includes, at the village level, skilled health attendant, capacity to remove anything that's left in the uterus after birth, capacity to give antibiotics, capacity to give drugs that will stop bleeding. Okay. If you have these basic services, you will be able to meet the crisis emergency of this 15% whom you can't anticipate. It's called emergency obstetric care, no? And that's what the law is saying now, that we need to move our health care system in order to be able to give these services at the grassroots level, because that's what the studies are also showing.
And Rom, is this going to be for free?
Yes, because the government should provide funding for these services, especially at the local level.
It's free, especially for the poor, for the marginalized
So it's gonna be-
women and adolescents. No? And those who have been identified under the National Household Targeting System. Or-
Now,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but on the surface, it looks all great, no? I guess we know a little bit of the reason, no? But there seems to be this reluctance to move forward. And I think for the benefit of our televiewers, where is that resistance coming from?
Yeah, because if you talk about providing better facilities to women, what's immoral about that, diba? There's nothing, I think, controversial about that. Giving them, especially those who cannot afford it, access
What's the
to
roadblock?
better health facilities.
And so that for the benefit of our televiewers also, kasi they're probably
One pillar
wondering.
down, diba?
Yeah,
Health facilities. So I guess what's the controversial? The second pillar would be access to the actual...
The petitions asked mainly focused also on the fact that they believe that some contraceptives cause abortions. Now, there is a problem here because the World Health Organization has already said that none of the contraceptives that are currently available and would be part of the package are abortive fashioned or cause abortion. But there is a different definition that that the anti-RH forces are giving to abortion, which they say is, for them, abortion is if you don't allow the fertilized ovum to implant. No. But even that, WHO has already said, none of these drugs work that way. But there's still some old literature and a few sources that say that's the IUD and some pills work that way, but the majority of scientific opinion isn't that saying that.
Okay.
So it's really a very, very small distinction. And if I listen to the Supreme Court arguments, you have to weigh that against the fact that the Constitution says in half of a phrase, protection of life at the moment of conception. And that's the problem, I think, and you're the lawyers, no? Because I, as a doctor, would just like to say that conception is not a medical or scientific term. So that's where the
I guess that's where the resistance is coming from. No?
yeah, that's where
Right.
the problem seems to be, a matter of terms.
Okay. Well, we have some questions from our televiewers, and we'd like to address them. Let's answer them with the help, of course, of our guests. Starting with Marisa. Marisa says, my child will be entering high school this coming school year. How will the DepEd introduce sex education to students? I'm worried that it may do more harm than good to my child's psyche.
I think Rom should answer this.
Yeah,
He
Rom?
mentioned earlier the
Yeah.
age-appropriate
Education.
sex
Sexuality
education.
and reproductive health education. I
Yeah.
think the fear is that, you know, children will be taught of sex as what the anti-RH forces are spreading during the debate. No, the DepEd will train teachers. There will be a course that will be developed, starting, of course, from values, teaching the right attitudes towards men and women, young and boys, proper attitude on how can you take care of your body as a child, because, you know, some children are not aware of
Yeah, and
what a touch to a girl's body is, no? Kaya napapagsamantalahan sila.
yeah.
So
And
something like
sometimes
that.
they're afraid to ask their parents.
Yes.
Yeah,
And it's a taboo. In,
yeah.
we all
In our-
know
in
that.
our- in our society, yeah.
Parents are having a hard time discussing sex and relationships at home.
Let me just add that there are a lot of technical standards already out there, how to deliver appropriate sexual education or sexuality education at various levels of the school system. In the daycare center that we run in UP Center for Women's Studies, even 2-3-year-olds, we have sex ed. What would that mean to a 2-3-year-old? No? First of all, we teach them non-conflict. When there's a conflict, non-aggressive ways of handling that conflict. And that's so important because later on, people thought this will not turn to violence in expressing sexual feelings. Okay, so that's very important to us.
Yeah.
And of course, we have
So
to teach.
it's beyond just the, well, the
Yeah, it's
so-called birds
values,
and the bees.
diba?
no?
Yeah, but if you are not aggressive in the way you handle difference, in the way you see someone who's different, you will not bully someone if they're gay, or blacker than you, or different from you.
Correct.
You will not respond in sexually aggressive ways to women. So that's a very important part of sexuality education for 2 to 3 years old, as well as life education in general. But we also teach them parts of the body because, unfortunately, it's a fact. Again, and the data is there that 2 and 3-year-olds can be subject to sexual abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very
The
enlightening.
law
no,
actually
because-
states that age appropriate and appropriate to the development of the youth. No? And before one can really come up with a curriculum itself, this has to go through a consultation process with parent-teachers associations, with community, with NGOs, with all those interested, you know, to really participate in the process. And then that's the only time that this will, you know, be the DepEd will implement this through teachers who are trained also in delivering this package of studies.
That's very enlightening because I think it will give comfort to the parents out there who are worried that they won't even know what suddenly the school is going to offer in terms of sex education if the RH law gets implemented. So it's good to know that parents out there, there's going to be a consultation process.
Oh, yes.
We have another question from Drew. I read the provisions of the RH law, but I am having trouble understanding what the certificate of compliance is about. Is this mandatory before a couple is licensed to get married? What is the significance of this certificate? Yeah, may bagong requirement, no?
Yes, it is. It's really required, you know, by law before one can be issued a marriage license. One has to go through this. Mga sessions, no, on family planning, on parenting, responsibilities of parenthood,
I've attended those.
nutrition, child health, and so on, to prepare you for family life, for parenthood. So this is required.
So what does the certificate of compliance require? Because I've attended all the other sessions that you mentioned earlier, the family planning, and of course, but the certificate of compliance was not required during my time. What is the added requirement to get the certificate of compliance?
Well, it's part of the law now.
The current law.
Yes, the certificate of compliance is issued after one goes through this session.
Counseling.
So it's similar. Sorry, I misunderstood. The certificate of compliance required by the RH law is that same certificate of compliance that I had to get prior to this law being passed.
Yes.
It's the same. I thought meron ka ng certificate of compliance for all the other sessions, and then you have another one that relates to specifically.
But you did not have to go through that?
No, I did, but I thought there was an additional requirement under the RH. So wala naman pala. So to the person asking this question, no need to worry. It's the same certificate of compliance that was required before the RH law.
All right. So, well, I have a couple of questions in my mind, especially with regard to, I guess, what the main highlights of the RH law, whether it's more on maternal health or population control. No? But I think we need to
take a short break, but we'll definitely address those questions, Rod, and address questions from our viewers. We'll take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages.
In 2012, the RH Bill, one of the most controversial bills, was passed into law, giving women the freedom of choice and access to information when it comes to their reproductive health. The RH law is not only applicable to women, it is also applicable to men. Under the law, reproductive health refers to the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being of a person relating to their reproductive system, its functions and processes. The reproductive health rights of individuals and couples assure their right to decide freely and responsibly whether or not to have children, including the number, spacing, and timing. They also have the right to make other decisions concerning reproduction and their reproductive health free of discrimination, coercion, and violence. To have information and to attain the highest standard of sexual health and reproductive health services. The law, however, does not include the right to an abortion or access to abortifacients, as abortion is still illegal and a punishable act.
Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel with our guests, Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio of the UP Center for Women's Studies, Mr. Romeo Dongeto, Executive Director of PLCPD, and Ms. Ana Maria Nemenzo of the Women Health Philippines.
Yeah, so of course, this is an interesting topic for everyone. But I wanted to ask, just before the break, I wanted to highlight this law, and it seems one of the reasons why it's controversial. Because to me, the maternal health, providing maternal health, that's parang a no-brainer. I think you should really provide that, you know. But I think a lot of people are questioning it because it's a population control measure. Now, you're with the PLCPD, correct, Rom?
Yeah.
You might want to clarify that. Is it really kind of a way to control population? Because a lot of people are allergic with that.
That's one misinformation, especially during the debate in both houses of Congress. If you will read the law, even if during the debate, if you will read the bill, clearly there's no targeting. There's no number of children that will be imposed by the government or under the program. So how can you say that it is a population measure or a population control measure? I think that the information that was given by your station earlier is the heart of this legislation. It is giving information and services to women so that they can, and couples, so that they can decide freely and responsibly on the number of children that they want to have.
I think one of the important things that were highlighted here after the break was one that it actually also benefits men because it gives men and women as couples information and the right to decide on how many children to have, including the spacing of the children. But I guess for those who are anti-RH, they were also saying, but people can decide this even without the law. Can you clarify what aspects of the law ensures that this type of decision can be made by couples? Why is there a need for this law to ensure that?
For me, the bill is really a social equity bill because rich people have access to the services, information, even the contraceptives that will allow them to have one, none, or 10 children if that's what they want. But I started with my organization, we were not really thinking of legislative advocacy until we saw bans left and right by local government officials.
Bans, you mean?
Yeah, they banned contraceptives.
They banned contraceptives.
Yes. So we need a law that ensures that women, especially women from poorer communities, are able to access the services that are necessary that will help them decide for themselves how many children they should have. And let me point out that a woman who wants 10 children should, under this law, should be given all the support she needs in order to have those children safely. Just as much as a woman who only wants 2 children. And the studies also show that most women in the Philippines would like to stop at 2, not.
Actually, this is something that's very enlightening because a lot of people think that RH bill actually RH law, controls the number or limits the number of children. But Dr. Agay is saying that actually, if you want to have 10 children, the RH law supports that by providing better health facilities, better health care. Kanina si Ms. Princess wanted to comment.
Can we also emphasize that that reproductive health is not just about family planning. Although contraceptives is a very important factor, in family planning. But the reproductive health provides services for about 12, 13 programs. And you already mentioned for men, reproductive rights and health also for men. But this comes under male sexual responsibility, and male involvement in family planning. But just to add to Dr. Guy's remarks, it also includes providing couples, those with infertility problems, So it also includes reproductive tract infections, it includes violence against women, adolescent health, etc., etc. There are about 12 to 13.
It covers a lot of things, yeah.
But the most controversial is family planning, and only because it deals, it refers to also contraceptives.
Which is a
and
taboo.
the church, the Catholic Church, is totally opposed to modern,
contraceptives,
modern contraceptives. But we really think that the reproductive health law is very important because without it, as Dr. Guy said, there will be local governments that may ban contraceptives. And in the past administrations, it has always been a touch and go. Family planning was introduced by President Marcos, and it was coercive. The women opposed that. During Cory's time, President Cory, it got stalled for about 3 years before it was again implemented. During Ramos' time, it proceeded well, and during President Estrada's time, it was okay. Now,
GMA's time?
when it came to GMAs, it was again prohibited, except for natural family planning. So it's a touch and go. It depends on the leadership. So now we really think a reproductive health law is important so that you really provide smoothly, continuously reproductive health services and family planning.
Well, I think one thing that
women.
was comforting when Dr. Guy was explaining it was the fact that she was saying this is backed up by medical, scientific studies
Exactly.
and standards of the World Health Organization.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to go into finding out yung mga myth busting, because before I studied the RH law, even when it was still a bill, I already started hearing several things, not just from social media, but basically also articles written about this law. So you get some types of conceptions even before you read the bill and now the law. So I'll go to Mr. Rom, since we're on the topic of contraceptives. Under this law, are local government units or the national government really required to distribute contraception to constituents?
Precisely. That's part of the program. That's what Dr. Guy mentioned earlier. If you want to address maternal health, family planning, including modern contraceptives, should be part of the whole approach.
So it's just, but again, the myth is that the government will just
Will
be giving
distribute,
away
yeah.
like
So
free
it's more
flyers
of-
and leaflets.
But because this
That's-
seems
that's
to be in
kind of
conflict with what
exaggerated, yeah.
Miss Princess is saying, because
Yeah.
actually Miss Princess was saying that if you want to have kids, this RH law will actually even provide services to men to address men's fertility concerns. So it's
to
not
to some extent that's for life.
exactly, that's actually conflicting. So what is really the policy under this law with respect to provision and distribution of contraception?
The law actually will, speaking as someone who has worked with clinical services for women in poor communities, there's a way to give contraceptives that upholds the religious beliefs of someone, the health needs of someone, and the right of a person to information and consent. When you think about it, a couple will need, a woman, she may change her partners, no? A woman will need, let's say, 40 years of some form of contraception from the time she begins to be sexually active to the time of her menopause. And that can change, no? Because if you are a young mother who is breastfeeding, you may need a different one. If your husband goes abroad, you may need a different contraceptive. If you are a Catholic and would like only natural family planning, you may need only advice for natural family planning. So good clinicians have a way of saying, okay, you're hypertensive, etc. This is not for you, but if your husband is beating you up, then this is for you. And women can come and say, I don't want this anymore, I'm not suited to this, my husband went away, let's change the method. And you have to change the method. So it isn't random distribution of contraceptives because it can never be helpful.
So that's the
way.
myth. That's the
Diba?
myth
That's
that
the
people
myth
do.
na
nagbasta
So you're
mo pa
giving it
ako
away,
papamigay,
like
no?
parang like a bowl, and you have it
No,
like candies in a bowl. Now anyone can just get it. No.
I really think that the woman's and man's, the couple's decision, it can be a woman alone, it can be a man alone, it can be a couple deciding what to do with their medical needs for contraception is best left to that person and their healthcare provider.
Right.
I really don't know why people will think that they have a right to tell people what to use, what not to use, as long as these are already, approved by our Food and Drug Administration, which takes a very strong hand actually in this law.
Just
in
very
certifying
quickly
the
though,
proper
if you don't mind me asking, since we're in the topic of maternal health and all that, for a lot of our televiewers, they're probably pregnant employees. Will there be a difference when it comes to their rights now? No? I mean, I know there are certain provisions in the the Labor Code, and several laws regarding, let's say, prenatal leave rights and all that. Will there be significant changes with regards to the rights of pregnant women in the workplace?
We have to bring in the Magna Carta of Women also, which has some provisions. So as was mentioned earlier, you are no longer allowed to discriminate in schools and the workplace. If someone gets pregnant, out of marriage, if that's usually that's the issue, no?
Yeah, okay.
So you're not supposed to fire this employee or make this student go on leave.
Right.
So that's an additional protection. The Magna Carta also allows, I think, more leave if you have a complicated pregnancy.
I understand you have like a half-day paid prenatal leave, right, for every month of your pregnancy. Is that
As
correct?
well. So you have to, for most women, we advise them really. And then PhilHealth has changed some of its packages because it wants to be able to support reproductive health and the reproductive health law. So we do advise women to go and study with someone who knows, see your PhilHealth representative, see your SSS representative, because there's a package that you can avail of, but they're in different places, so you have to know.
And also pregnancy or the number of children one has on the part of the woman should not be taken against her, you know, in terms of hiring or firing, you know, so that's very clear.
Yes, actually, that's in the labor code.
Right.
That would be a form of discrimination. Yes.
All right, we still have a couple of questions from our viewers. Greg is asking, how true is it that with the implementation of the RH law, it will not be long before policies on hindering couples from having more than 2 children will be proposed? Is this a possible scenario here in the Philippines, like that in Singapore, for example, or in China?
Oh, that's a one-child policy, diba?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
China.
It's two-child
So,
policy. I don't think so. I don't think it will happen.
You know what I can say to Greg? If that happens, I will meet him in the streets again, and we're going to rally against this. This is horrible, and it will never win over the dead bodies of the reproductive rights advocates.
And I
because
think
it's
one
a
thing
violation
to
of rights.
also add to that, Greg, is what Miss Princess said earlier, that in fact, and even what Dr. Guy said earlier, that in fact this law supports all other couples out there who want to have children or more children.
Yes.
They will provide the facilities and services necessary for couples to have children or more children if they wanted to. And we have another question from Stacy, and she's asking, since abortion is still considered a crime in the Philippines, what happens if the pregnancy of the mother is considered dangerous to her health and life? Who has the responsibility of determining if the pregnancy should be terminated? Does the woman have that option?
Well,
the woman has the option. First of all, it's very important to note that in the reproductive health bill, whatever is the cause of your abortion, spontaneous or illegal, you're supposed to have humane treatment when you go to the hospital, because it's also one of the leading causes of maternal deaths, illegal, unsafe abortions. And we have documented, my organization, Likaan, has documented a lot of medical rights abuses for women who go to hospital seeking post-abortion care. And I, you know, it breaks my heart that medical doctors should do this or medical personnel should do this. But the horror stories maybe for another show. Now the question of Stacy is, I don't know if legally, because some of our friends in the legal profession who have studied this very closely are saying that actually there is no constitutional ban against saving a woman's life, for example.
but doesn't that take priority?
And that should
Saving
take
a woman's life
And,
should take priority.
and friends of older doctors tell us, for example, I have an older doctor friend whose wife got measles during her pregnancy, and they were sure that there would be severe fetal malformation. And at that time, there was absolutely no problem getting an abortion, a therapeutic abortion for his wife.
And this is in the Philippines.
And this is in the Philippines. Things have changed so badly against women's rights that now doctors are truly afraid
To conduct it.
to do things that actually medical protocol says you should provide. No? So there are so many cases like eclampsia, which is actually if you don't evacuate the contents of the uterus, both the mother and the fetus will die, because of course if the mother dies. And yet there are no clear-cut guidelines and doctors are really afraid. So there's a lot of work to do. Ectopic pregnancy is another
it's
thing.
automatic, no? You save the mother.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the RH bill has not legalized abortion.
No, it
Abortion is still illegal under the revised penal code, right? And the only times that there might be some type of abortion, it's not really the right concept of abortion. It's not abortion to get rid of the baby, but this is basically a medical procedure to save the mother's life.
And it's not even in the RH law. What is in the RH law is that for whatever reason, whether your abortion is spontaneous or induced, if you go to a hospital seeking care after your abortion, you should have all the humane treatment that you should be able to get, like any ordinary human being
they should not
seeking
be
care.
judging you because you want to have an
It's
abortion.
really
That's,
saving the mother's life
because,
after. And then I guess, you know, just to clarify, because this is a legal issue, I think in that case, the RH law does not make abortion legal, but doctors are required to treat those who have illegal abortions humanely. But I think based on what our legal process or laws provide, then that woman, assuming she survives, can still be subject to prosecution for getting an illegal abortion, right?
Yes.
So,
and I guess that's why the doctors are also reluctant. They don't want to be part of a...
yeah, I mean, because
illegal
the act of the Illegal Abortion Act is a crime by itself. So I think that does not remove the criminal liability of someone who gets an illegal abortion. But then, under the RH law, to seek medical help is a human entitlement.
Yeah, I think you should invite us back to talk about
Oh, right,
abortion.
Yes, that's a totally separate. Because again, the RH law is not really about abortion.
Not about
It's
abortion.
about providing.
It's not about purely about
health
contraceptives.
services.
You know, it's and I personally learned a lot more. No, because that's unfortunately that's what's being highlighted, and the reason for its for the TRO and everything. So.
I think we should value the health and life of women.
Ultimately,
especially
that's
those you know who become mothers and who risk their life going through pregnancy. I think people should recognize the value of that.
Very good statement. That's very appropriate before we take another break. We hit on a very interesting topic, but we have to take another short break. But before that, we'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio of the UP Center for Women's Studies, Mr. Romeo Dungueto, Executive Director of Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development, or PLCPD, and Ms. Ana Maria Nemenzo of Women Health Philippines for being with us tonight to discuss the RH law. Thank you for your very enlightening
for
discussion.
enlightening us and enlightening our televiewers. Yeah, it's very helpful.
And again, maybe we'll save them for another episode.
We'll focus purely on contraceptives and abortion. How about that?
Okay, for now, Legal Help Desk will return after these messages.
Okay.
You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. And today I have to say, it's not just
very educational.
For me, it's not. I guess it was not just the viewers, but for me as well. I learned so much from our guests.
I learned a
about
lot.
The RH
I have
law.
to say, you know, when people talk about the RH law, very controversial. You go
Before
to
I
mass
studied the law, or when it was still a bill, that's why I kept mistaking it for a bill. I actually had a lot of misconceptions about it as well, just based on what I would
Same
hear
here.
or read from blogs or hear from the news. But three of the things that I think were very important was that first, the bill, the RH, now a law, the RH law is really geared towards reproductive health. And the three pillars mentioned by Dr. Guy, which is actually what based on scientific studies and the World Health Organization standards, is that there are three pillars to health, especially for women when it comes to maternal health. One is access to good health facilities. Second, access to good health professionals. And then third, which she says is indispensable to the two pillars, is access to contraceptives.
As you mentioned, the contraceptive part. I mean, a lot of the misconception under the RH law is that the government or the local governments will just be giving away free condoms or free artificial contraceptives. Apparently, that's not the case. There's going to be a lot of consultation with the local government in how to disseminate or to distribute these contraceptives. So
and it's not
like,
even, sorry to correct you, Rod, it's not disseminating. From what I understand, it's in line with what the doctors find.
Correct. Yeah.
If,
That's right.
if
There's
it's
gonna be consultation.
necessary, if,
Yeah.
if it's only required to be prescribed to you, if, for instance, pregnancy is dangerous, or if you make a conscious decision to not have, to space your kids. So I think it's
Yeah.
more of couples going to a doctor and
Correct.
contraceptives being part of the medication
That's right. As I mentioned, there's
process
like
for the reproductive
there's going to be
health.
consultation rather than it's just being distributed like that. And also, a good point that was raised was that sex education part. It's not they're not going to be talking about sex in the classes, but rather they're going to be talking about, for example, things like violence, parang how to respond. I mean, we're going to be teaching young kids how to respond in certain situations so that later on they won't grow up to have aggressive sexual behavior.
I mean,
So parang,
according
you know,
to Rom, it's age appropriate.
age appropriate. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's,
and then for me, the very important feature of this law, which I think is one thing that makes me happy about this law, is actually it encourages children. If you're a couple, for instance, that wants to have kids, then they make services accessible to you so that they can advise you on reproductive health, on how to have children, and even have services for men
for
to
if you
address
have
fertility
yeah,
issues.
fertility, that's right.
Yes.
So all right, so that's our recap. We do have some questions sent by our viewers on topics that we had previously discussed, and we'd like to answer them. And Marites asks, I am separated from my husband for 9 years, but we are still married. He has had several relationships in between that time and has since fathered 2 children to different women. We have a child together, and we would like to know if I can still file a case against him given our separation. So it seems like they only separated, Karen. They're not. Seems like there's no annulment.
There's no
yet.
annulment.
All right.
And to answer this question, you can file a case against your husband. I guess it depends what type of case do you want to file. First, because of his infidelity, you can file a case for concubinage if meron, kasi mas mahirap if he were the kung siya yung babae, you could have filed a case for adultery. That's a criminal case because each sexual act would be a criminal case against him. But in this case, since he's a guy, you have to check kung ano yung circumstances nung relationship niya with the other woman. If he had cohabited with these women or had sexual relationships under scandalous circumstances, then you can file a case for concubinage because you're still legally married. Now, if ayaw mo naman ng criminal case, you can still file a case for custody, I mean, support for your kids with your husband. And also infidelity, if you're not legally separated, is also a ground for legal separation.
And also for vowsy, no? I would infidelity and I guess.
Yeah, the sexual, like the infidelity can be a form of psychological abuse.
Yes, psychological abuse. So you're
against the violence
vowsy.
against women and children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now go ahead.
Another question is via Facebook from Arnold. I bought a taxi company and later learned that it didn't have a franchise from LTFRB. I want to demand my money back. Should I forward this matter to the barangay or directly to the courts? What should I file and what is the process?
I think in this case you should go directly to the LTFRB, because obviously he was posing, the franchisor was posing that he had a franchise with the LTFRB. You can go to the LTFRB. They do have a hotline there, a desk where you can go and request for guidance. No? But I think ultimately this is also a situation where you can also file in the courts. There has to be some kind of estafa
and
fraud.
for fraud and also sa LTFRB kasi there are penalties associated with selling a license na wala na pala.
Correct.
That you already
Yes.
sold to someone else.
All right. Now, our last question is from Maris. My ex-boyfriend has been texting foul things to me, even though we've been separated for 4 years now. Can I use these text messages as evidence against him if I file for a case of vowsy?
Yes.
Okay.
Maurice, definitely you can use those text messages to file a case for vowsy. One, text messages are acceptable as evidence. And second, even if this is just an ex-boyfriend, ex-boyfriends, or even, diba, before when we took up this law, even one-night stands. Basta you're in an intimate relationship with someone, even if this was previously, any type of violence, and that includes psychological abuse, lalo na through text messages, that's a ground for filing a case for vowsy against this ex-boyfriend of yours. And definitely you can use your text messages. You can show that if you don't want to go to courts right away, pwede ka lumapit agad sa barangay. You can show those text messages as proof so that you can get a temporary protection order.
Yan. All right. All right, now this is the saddest moment of the show. We're about to end. So sadly, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We'd like to thank our guests who were with us earlier and our viewers who sent us their questions via social media. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions on our topic for tonight, you can share them on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.
All the congresses. And immediately after it was passed, as according to Guy nga, they submitted 15 cases against the reproductive health law before the Supreme Court.
Various groups filed, or just
more or
basically
less,
one?
but they're all allied. They're all allied to one another. So it has taken that long, and I think the denial of the implementation of the reproductive health law is causing a lot of problems, particularly for women who have been dying every day. And so I think we should lay the blame, for women, for maternal deaths on the steps of all those groups that have denied the implementation of this law.
Now that you've brought up deaths caused by lack of this law, what will this law provide to women in order to ensure their health and their safety?
Karen, there are three pillars for reducing maternal deaths that are scientifically proven, recommended by leading health organizations, for example, like Congress in early December 2012. And then was signed into law before the end of 2012, like December 28. Very quickly, the implementing rules and regulations were also put out and signed. But before the law could be implemented, on March 19, the Supreme Court issued a status quo ante-order saying the law can't be implemented based on petitions that wanted the Supreme Court to decide whether the law is constitutional or not. Okay. And we're still waiting for that decision at this point.
All right.
Well, I guess this is an appropriate time that even if the law is still on TRO, Dr. Guy and of course Ms. Princess and Rom, you can enlighten a lot of the viewers here on the benefits of the RH bill, especially of course for women's health, reproductive rights. Will they really benefit if this law was given full effect?
Can I just mention that we fought for this law for 14 years.
14 years?
Wow. 14 years.
Wow.
So women and both men and women fought for this law. And we continued to lobby through all.
The RH law, which was passed in December of 2012, should have made it possible for women to have access to information on their reproductive health and to practice the freedom of having choices on reproduction, as well as protect their maternal rights.
ini-ensure ng RH law ang serbisyo para sa mga kababaihan gaya ng family planning services and information, gaya ng prenatal, postnatal, no? Services. No? Pag ikaw ay nagbubuntis o nanganganak.
In fact, there are several laws that support and protect the maternal rights of women. Under Section 13 of the Magna Carta for Women, a pregnant faculty member and student shall not be refused admission on account of her pregnancy outside of marriage during her term in school.
Most common problem pagdating yung nagbubuntis sila yung kanilang maternal functions. That is why ang batas natin sa labor code nag-provide ng maternity leave in relation to the SSS law. Under the Magna Carta of Women also, yung faculty member na babae, public man o private school, nagbuntis outside of marriage, dati tinatanggal sa trabaho, ngayon hindi na pwedeng tanggalin yan because that would be discrimination against women.
Similarly, it is unlawful for any employer to refuse admission of his pregnant employee from returning to work or to discharge her due to her pregnancy according to the labor code. With several laws protecting the maternal rights of women, how come violations against these are still rampant? How can women protect their maternal rights? And which government agencies should they go to concerning their maternal rights?
Good evening. You're watching Legal Help Desk from the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. We are continuing our celebration of Women's Month by tackling the reproductive health law.
Our guests for tonight are Dr. Sylvia Estrada Claudio of the University of the Philippines Center for Women's Studies, Mr. Romeo Dongato, Executive Director of the Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development, and Ms. Princess Nemenzo of Women Health Philippines.
Ayan. So good evening. So it's Dr. Guy, Rom, and Princess. Yeah, we're jam-packed tonight.
Yes.
Because,
and for the first time, ever since Women's Month started, we have a gentleman with us.
There you go.
For the past few episodes.
Yeah, kasi I've been feeling alone. I've been feeling alone for the past weeks. No? Actually, 4 weeks. This is the fourth week. Or fourth week, third week. Anyway, so
Yes.
it's always we always had guests. We're women, but I'm also one of you guys. I mean, one of you girls, one of you women. So so we'll start off, I guess. Again, we're gonna be talking about maternal rights, but in mostly in the light of the RH law, no, which is still pending in the Supreme Court. Perhaps maybe Dr. Guy, maybe you want to give a status of where we are for our televiewers who probably don't know what the current situation is with regards to the RH law.
Yes, the RH law became a law in December. It passed both houses of